Hello. First of all, I want to give a big shout out and a very, very big thank you to Miss Jamie, who reminded me that in a previous video, I had said I would make a separate video on transition words and phrases, but I forgot. So thank you, Jamie, for reminding me. I'm definitely glad to do this because this is an important part of your preparation from TOEFL. You definitely start with your vocabulary words, synonyms. You're doing a journal, writing a journal every day. This should be part of it too, because, and I just want to point out something. Everything that I'm showing you in regards to preparing for TOEFL, you can definitely carry that on into your personal life. So if you're not studying for the TOEFL or the IELTS, that's okay because this will definitely help you with English, whether for a job or being at the university or just having a conversation with somebody. I will say the information we are going over today, this would be information that is more on the formal level. So these would not be words that you necessarily would be writing to your buddy through text or talking casually to your neighbor. These are words that if you're giving a presentation, speaking in an interview, perhaps to upper management, or you're writing a formal paper, formal email. This is more on the formal side. So always know your audience, and this is what we would do on the formal side. But enough of my rambling, let's get started. So what exactly are transition phrases? These are words or expressions that we use to connect ideas in writing. They actually help the reader understand what it is you're trying to convey. More information, obviously, given. And it improves coherence, which means understanding more. So if I'm reading something you wrote and you're using some of these transitions, wow, it's really going to help me understand what it is you're trying to convey to me. And we all remember convey from other videos. I think we should know that word by now. But in any event, they're really, really important for your TOEFL. They are great for the speaking part too. So while this will help you do very well in the writing part, this will also help you with the speaking part. The reason why is when you are speaking, and this, let's just take TOEFL out of this. When you are speaking to somebody in a professional capacity, you want to let them know when you conclude. And I'm going to give you an example. If I'm talking, and then I just stop, you don't really know if I'm done talking. But if I had said in conclusion or to sum it up, you know that I'm done. I've ended things. Same thing if I send you a really long email or I write a really big essay. At the end, in conclusion, I'm done. I've wrapped things up. So that is one example why it can really help somebody, the reader or the listener. But let's go over types of transitions. So addition, of course, we're going to add more information to what it is that we're speaking about. Contrast, remember, I've explained this before. Contrast would be show differences. Sometimes we'll see on an essay or some sort of exam, compare and contrast. Compare would be show similarities, contrast would be show differences. Example, pretty self-explanatory there. It gives examples. When we're talking about cause and effect, we're explaining reasons or results. And then, of course, conclusion, we're summing everything up, summarizing ideas, everything we've just written or spoken about, and bam, we are done. All right, here are some common transition phrases. So when we want to add more information, addition, we can use words like moreover, furthermore. We can also say in addition. So when you want to add additional information, those are really good words to use. You also sound really fancy, more intelligent. So when we're talking about contrast, when we want to show differences, we don't have to say in contrast, we can use words like however. And I think everybody at this point has heard of the word however. However, I would like to point out that I'm awesome than you. No, I'm kidding. Bad example. But in any event, I think you kind of get my point. However, on the other hand, is another way to show differences. So if we want to give an example, we don't have to say for example. We can definitely say for example, or we can say such as. Both are the same thing. But I want to stop here really quick. Keep all of these different ways to say things in mind because you don't want to use the same transition over and over and over again. We don't want to do that, but I'll get into that in just a second. So if we're going to give a lot of examples at different points in our writing, we're not going to say, for example, for example, for example. No, we want to switch it up. For example, here, and then maybe later on, we'll say such as. Now, cause and effect. We can say, therefore, or as a result, everyone is happy. Or in conclusion. You can definitely say in conclusion, but maybe you want to shorten it up a bit. Maybe you just want to say to sum up, or one of my favorite things to use is lastly. Lastly, I would like to say, or lastly, blah, 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 blah. So those are kind of where we're going with these. Let's take some examples and have a little fun with them. So, furthermore, education improves employment opportunities. See how this one word, furthermore, makes our sentence sound so beautiful, so intelligent, and really makes it flow. However, I'm going to point something out here. Okay. However, this solution may not work for every country. However, it's one of my favorite ones to use. For example, many students struggle with time management. For example, I want to point this one out. So remember, we don't want to use the same one over and over and over again. So this is a good time to practice with using different ones for the sentences. So I could say, for example, but what if I've already used for example too many times? I could say, such as many students struggle with time management. I'm saying the same thing. I'm conveying the same information. I'm giving you those examples. So keep that in mind and kind of keep track of how much you're using of one transition so you're not repeating yourself. As a result, the population has decreased. That's a good one. In conclusion, technology has changed how we communicate. Just look at these sentences. Just by putting in these transitions, you really, you sound better, you write better, everything looks a lot more professional, and you sound super smart. But again, we want to avoid repeating the same transition word. Believe it or not, your listener, your reader, they're going to lose focus if you're repeating the same thing over and over again. Because what happens is, for example, it's like then you quit paying attention because it's the same thing over and over and over again. So you definitely want to spice it up, I guess. Make it so it's not redundant. Redundant is another word for repeating yourself. And you want to use transitions at the beginning of paragraphs or new ideas or at the end. Now, it's great when you're transitioning to new ideas, and you can do that in the same paragraph. For instance, which is another one of, for example, for instance. And I'm going to use that one because I've said for example too many times. So, for instance, if I'm talking about comparing and contrasting stuff, this is a good way to kind of introduce the differences and then start to explain why. It helps the reader and the listener with the direction of what you're trying to convey. So I could be talking about something and then I can say, However, blah, 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 because blah, blah, blah. That reader and that listener, because of my transition word that I've now connected, understands I'm talking about this and this is the direction I'm going in. Now, I know this sounds really confusing. You're going to just have to practice and trust me on this. I promise this will work. Your TOEFL score will be amazing and you'll sound so awesome when you're speaking. ChatGPT is a great resource to find more transition words. You definitely want to practice using different types so you're not repeating yourself. Okay, so let's go over some more examples. Additionally, we can say additionally, or we can say in the same way. So when we're adding more information, we can also say, in the same way, students should review grammar regularly. Or additionally, students should review grammar regularly. Or we can say, in addition, students should review grammar regularly. I hate that word. Hard, too many sounds there. But I've used 3 different transition phrases, words, and I have the same meaning. They sound beautiful, but it's a way I can mix it up so I don't sound like I'm saying the same thing over and over and over again, and my reader or listener is not losing focus of what I'm trying to convey. So, contrast. Again, we want to show some differences. I could say, nevertheless, or even though. So, for example, nevertheless, the topic was complex. She explained it clearly. In contrast, the topic was complex. She explained it clearly. Even though the topic was complex, she explained it clearly. So, again, contrast, we're showing differences. We've got some different options. Now, I always say, for example, but I have to myself learn to mix it up a little bit, spice it up. So instead of saying, for example, I could make myself look fancier and say, to illustrate, many people use smartphones for daily tasks. For example, many people use smartphones for daily tasks. Namely, many people use smartphones for daily tasks. So these are all the same meaning. We're just using different transition phrases. And then, of course, cause and effect. Here's a couple of ones we can use. Consequently, the team improved their performance. Or if we want to simplify this, due to this, the team improved their performance. Same meaning, choose what you like. Conclusion. To summarize, it was a productive semester. All in all, it was a productive semester. In conclusion, lastly, whatever you choose, so many different ways to make that conclusion. So let me go to the next page. All right. Moreover, online learning is more flexible for students. In addition, it helps save transportation costs. Look how beautiful that sounded just by our transition phrases. Sounds so beautiful. So, we're talking about how flexible online learning is, and then we want to add more information as to why it's awesome because it helps save transportation costs. Okay. Ooh, let's talk about some differences. So, however, not all students have access to the internet. On the other hand, traditional classrooms offer direct interaction. So, look, this sounds really good, but notice how, however, and on the other hand, are 2 things that go with differences. But I'm not going to use the same one because it's too close together. My reader's going to get confused, lose focus. That's why I want to use however and on the other hand, 2 different ones. I mixed it up. It sounds better. It flows better. I'm not repeating myself. All right. Here's another one. So my worst habit when it comes to transitions is I constantly use for example. That's what comes to my brain. I have to remember to spice it up and make myself sound better. But here we're talking about giving examples, but I'm using two different examples. So for example, many universities offer free online courses such as Harvard and MIT through edX. So if I just said, for example, many universities offer free online courses, for example, Harvard and MIT, I've repeated myself. It doesn't sound as good. And if I keep saying, for example, you're going to lose focus, you're going to lose interest because all you hear is, for example. So I mixed it up. I'm not sounding redundant where I'm repeating myself. All right, let me go to the next one. Cause and effect. Therefore, students can learn at their own pace. As a result, more adults are returning to school. See how it's really good to mix it up. And if you've noticed how in these sentences or these examples that I've been going over, we're talking about the same thing. We're giving additional information. We're giving more differences, examples, whatnot, but we're not repeating ourselves. Therefore, students can learn at their own pace. Therefore, more adults are returning to school. Does not, no. So that's why we want to add different ones to spice it up. Therefore, as a result, so it flows more, it sounds better. All right, let's go over the last one, conclusion. In conclusion, online education is a growing trend. To sum it up, it offers many advantages and some challenges. Now, if I said in conclusion, online education is a growing trend, in conclusion, it offers many advantages and some challenges. No way. So that's why we want to change our transitions. We don't want to repeat ourselves. So again, this is crazy video, but there is a method to my madness. Start practicing these transitions. Go to ChatGPT, look for different transitions, different ways that you can use to explain yourself. And so again, types of transitions are addition, contrast, example, cause and effect, conclusion. There's your kind of base. Look for transitions that go into each category and see how many you can find. Most importantly, work with the ones that you are comfortable with because you don't want to sound awkward. So, if consequently is not a word that you feel comfortable with, or a word that you can pronounce well, don't use it. Obviously, know what it means, because if you're reading something on your TOEFL exam and you come across consequently, you need to know what it means. You don't have to use it, but know what it means. The worst thing you can do for yourself is to awkwardly use a word that you're not sure how to use or you mispronounce it. So always make sure you are comfortable with it. You've got some good pronunciation and you're feeling comfortable, and never ever repeat the same one. All right, I hope this has been helpful. Thank you, Jamie, for the reminder. See you in the next video. Keep those messages coming so I know what to do next. I love to help you all.